basically on the pharmacology of drug use, and the pharmacology of drug use is important to us, right? We haven't done chapter 2 yet, have we? We only did 1, right? We only did 1. Okay. The reason why the pharmacology of drug use is important is because, hold on, let me enable Maria. Where is she? Okay. The pharmacology of drug use is important because if we're going to make sociologically informed decisions about drugs, we kind of want to know how dangerous they are. And remember we talked about this last week, that some drugs are more dangerous than others, and that does factor into social policies about drugs, right? That makes sense? So let me enable Denisha. So this chapter is kind of like an overview of the pharmacology of drugs and how they work and operate so that we can understand, I guess, how potentially dangerous and how potentially addictive the drugs are. Does that make sense? Okay, so pharmacological action is one thing we're going to talk about. And pharmacological action, and another reason, sorry, that we need to kind of think about the objective qualities of drugs, or the way that drugs chemically operate, is because we want to think about ways in which we can prevent drug use also. And a big part of behavioral research is related with drug prevention. So let's just get some of these terms down. The first term that I'm going to tell you about is called pharmacological action or drug action. And that's simply how does the drug's chemical structure interact with the biological organism. And so how does the drug interact with the body? And this is also known as drug action. So once the drug gets into the system, what parts of the brain does it operate with? So here's, it's kind of like every drug, right, has certain receptors in the brain that drug fits into. So what happens is, if you take a specific drug, it's going to have specific effects on you according to what that drug can do in your brain. So let's say that in your brain, a drug has kind of like a key shape. Okay, so if I have a key, I only have a key that opens up my front door, right? Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so a drug so let's say what the front door in my brain, the door in my brain or the lock in my brain is based on short-term memory. So I have a key in my brain. These are transmitters in my brain where I basically, okay, now I have an echo. So somebody just came on that gave me an echo. Okay, that person just stopped. So I have, let's say in my brain, there's a lock in my brain that deals with respiration, that's breathing, okay? There are certain drugs that can kind of hijack or act like a key, the key that fits into my brain that's in charge of respiration, and change my breathing patterns. So some drugs actually can affect respiration, breathing. And if they can affect or hijack the key that controls your breathing, so that makes sure that you're breathing enough and properly, then that drug kind of takes over and takes charge of breathing and can actually kill you because it can stop your breathing. So some drugs are able to do this, like alcohol can actually negatively impact your respiration because it can hijack the neurotransmitters in your body, in your brain, that are in charge of breathing. So can heroin. There are other neurotransmitters in your brain that are in charge of memory, short-term memory. So drugs like marijuana, although they're not going to kill you because they don't mimic keys that are in charge of breathing, marijuana can actually negatively impact your memory. So there are these biological effects. Does this make sense? Okay, so pharmacological action is basically how does the chemical structure of the drug interact with the biological organism. So how does it interact with particular receptors? Okay? And the receptors are in charge of different things. We have receptors for, like I said, memory, like I said, breathing, respiration, etc. Okay? So that's how it interacts with the body. Once it interacts with the body, it has a certain effect. Okay? A drug effect is basically the effect the drug has on the body. So once it interacts with your brain and the receptors and hijacks, we call it hijacking a receptor because it looks like the key. It fits into the lock in charge of memory, let's say. And then what's the effect of that? The effect of that is I can't remember anything, right? So with marijuana is a negative for short-term memory. So the effect of that pharmacological action, how it interacts with the body, is difficulty remembering. So drug effects are kind of what it is produced on your body after the drug interacts. So a drug effect of alcohol, we've all seen this. What happens when people drink too much, Maria? What was that? What happens when people drink too much? What kind of effect does the drug have on them?
They start behaving differently.
They behave differently, maybe they get silly, they start to slow down, and eventually you can actually stop breathing because it negatively impacts your respiration. So that's a drug effect. So drug effects and drug actions are two physiological effects of drugs. So there are different types of effects that you can have. Drug effects can be physical. So after the drug gets into my system, I can drink alcohol and my blood alcohol level rises. That's a physical effect. I can have psychoactive effects. You know what psychoactive means? Psychoactive means how you think. So it means how it impacts my thinking. So the psychoactive effects can be lowering my inhibitions. So maybe I don't feel like constraining my behavior, and I'll be like more aggressive. So that's a psychoactive effect of drugs, how it impacts my thinking. And a lot of people on alcohol become more aggressive because they're not restrained as much. Another physical effect, to give you another example, is ataxia. You know how people who drink start to get sloppy and slur their words? That's another physical effect. Another psychoactive effect of drugs like cocaine makes people extremely alert. Those are psychoactive effects. So those are also, the physical and psychoactive effects are also what we call acute effects. What does acute mean? Acute means short term. So soon after I take the drug, I have these acute effects. So acute effects are short-term effects of the drug. Some side effects of the drug are, Casey, acute. Side effects are basically what we call the unintended effects of drugs. So I took the drug, but I wasn't intending on getting addicted. So we talk about dependence as a side effect. You take heroin, and now the side effect is I need it to function. I take some drugs, and I have a side effect where I now have dry mouth. That happens with a lot of antidepressant medication. There's also chronic effects. Chronic effects are the long-term effects of drug use, meaning like cirrhosis of the liver. Some drugs have worse long-term effects than others. So these are all things we have to think about physiologically when we think about drugs and whether or not we think that they're good to have lingering around in society and what kind of usage we want to have. Does this all make sense? Okay, good. I like the participation, so please participate a lot since you're on camera. Okay. Negative effects of drugs. We talk about things that we have to think about when we want to control drugs. What are the negative effects, and should we control the drugs? We think about how does it impact the health of society? What are the medical costs to society? Drugs like tobacco and alcohol, actually legal drugs ironically, create the biggest, most negative effects. Did you guys know that?
No.
Yes, and you know why? One of the reasons why is because they're accessible. And so what you'll learn in this class is the more accessible a drug is, the more damaging that drug is going to be. Because the thing that drives drug use is, the most common thing that drives drug use, or the strongest predictor of drug use, is accessibility, having it there. So when you make drugs accessible, people use them more. So that's why alcohol and tobacco have the most medical cost to society, because they're easily accessible, so they're used more. You also see people losing. Negative effects are like loss of function, family and job, meaning that people aren't fulfilling their family obligations, they're not working. And the other negative drug effects is some drugs lower inhibitions and impact our behaviors and cause us to engage in crime. And some drugs are worse than others when it comes to this factor. So we're going to talk more about that kind of stuff, but these are all things we have to think about, because these aren't so much social or subjective things. These are things that are not debatable. This is just how the drug impacts your body. Yes. And how it makes people act. Does that make sense? Maria?
Yes.
Is Maria frozen? No, you're not. Okay. You're just deep in thought. Okay, so let's think about the drug action of marijuana. Marijuana binds with, like I said, this receptor in the brain that's in charge of short-term memory. So marijuana mimics or looks like the key that monitors or controls my short-term memory. It is also has a key shape similar to the part of my brain that is in charge of movement and coordination. So that's my drug action. And then the effect is that I can't remember anything. I have a bad short-term memory. So marijuana binds with the brain that impacts how people think. The cortex, those are all areas. So the drug effect is the effect on the short-term memory and movement. So you get the difference? It's not that difficult, really, right? Okay, so let me tell you, I had a person in my class who told me that he was much better at remembering things when he was smoking marijuana. And I said that can't possibly be true, because marijuana, what do we know about marijuana from just talking about this class? Just what we've been talking about right now. What does marijuana negatively affect?
Your short-term memory.
Short-term memory.
Short-term memory, and we know that that's a physiological, objective trait that really isn't debatable, correct? Is that debatable?
No.
No.
It's going to affect everybody differently. Now, people have different genetic tendencies to become addicted to drugs. So like some people have genes that make them more susceptible to becoming alcoholic, or people have genes that make them more susceptible to becoming smokers. They've done research on that. They've seen that. But everybody, if you continue to use the same drugs over and over, eventually everybody's going to become addicted. And some are more quickly addicted. You'll become more quickly addicted based on some of the drugs. So anyway, this guy was debating with me over whether or not marijuana actually impacted your memory. So I brought him the study because this study wanted to examine the cognitive or the effects of drugs on the thinking of marijuana on how people think. And what this study did was it had 113 subjects. So it had 50 males and 50 females and 63 males. And these people were all about were all children of mothers who actually used soft drugs when they were pregnant. And they ran a bunch of studies prospectively. Do you guys know what prospective study means? What does it mean when we say a prospective study? So a prospective study, which I'll write down here, I don't know if I have the word in a slide. A prospective study means that they're doing it in real time. So they're asking people questions in real time. So every year they're interviewing them. As opposed to like asking them to remember backwards, they're asking them in real time, this year what did you do? Did you use drugs? that kind of question, as opposed to, tell me back when you were 5. Now that you're 30, do you remember, or not 5, let's just say 8. No, that's not a good age. 14, do you remember using drugs? So this was a prospective study, and they asked people about their marijuana use, and they found that some people were heavy users and were current users, okay, meaning that they were actually smoking marijuana at the time of the study. Some people were ex-users, meaning they had smoked marijuana but were no longer current users, and some people had never used marijuana at all. And they gave these people tests on their memory. And they gave them IQ tests, and they looked at, immediate memory and general delayed memory, which are just 2 types of memory tests. And they found that people who were actually currently using marijuana scored lower on memory than people, and IQ, than people who didn't use, were former users, or who had never used. So what does this study tell me? If they ran these tests, I see somebody typing. It supports this drug action, right? These findings basically go with the findings that we have about how marijuana interacts with the brain and unlocks the memory area and takes it over and makes it difficult to remember. Participators? Maria, I thought you were going to participate.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Who's going to talk to me? No, that's okay. But I need you guys to talk, the ones that have their thing. What? Derek, what's the problem?
I was gonna ask him the short-term memory.
Oh yeah, no, I can hear you. So just participate. Go ahead. According to this study, yes, because this study showed that former marijuana users, people who are classified as, using but stopping, got their memory back. But I don't know if it depends on what kind of chronic user you are. So these people were not that old at the time of the study. And let's say it's somebody who's using it like 25 years every day. I have no idea if that's going to permanently damage their brain. But I think if you're a casual or maybe periodic for heavy user for some time and then you stop, it'll restore your memory. But I don't know if you're a really serious user over about 25 years, if that's going to help, if that's going to come back. Does that answer your question? Right, and I can try to find one for you because I've been meaning to do that. So maybe I can look one up tomorrow to see if there's anything that looks at, like, maybe, heavy longitudinal. Like, we're talking about 25 years smokers and people who have smoked chronically. So I want to look that up too because I've been wondering that myself. But for the most part, if you stop smoking, according to this study, you're okay. Your memory will restore. So, like, I guess if you're using in college for a couple of years and you may use heavily, then chances are your memory will come back. Okay. So, here's the other thing that's really important. So, okay, so before we go back, so that other study, the Freed study, demonstrates the drug action of marijuana, right, and the drug effects. It supports these objective patterns that we were talking about. The other thing that influences the effects of drugs actually are the route of administration. The route of administration is just the method of taking a drug. So can anybody think about what would be the route of administration, Alexandra? Injecting would be one. it's kind of like smoking. So it's how you ingest the drug also affects how toxic or how addictive the drug is going to be, because the way that it goes into your body will alter the how quickly you can become addicted to a drug. Some drugs are more addictive because of the route of administration. So the route of administration can impact the intensity of the drug action and the intensity of the drug effect. And some routes of administration are more dangerous than others. So as a sociologist, I want to know if I'm going to make decisions about drugs and I'm going to make policies or, make an informed sociological decision about drugs, I want to know how are these drugs generally taken, and are they taken using dangerous routes? So route of administration is the method. So here's my little chart, and we're going to go through. And actually, I created a table. Did you guys get this under course documents where I outline all the different routes of administration? Like each one, it's in a table with the pros and cons. I don't know if you saw it. But why do we care? Okay, why do we care about the route of administration? It impacts the drug action and it impacts the drug effect. And some are more efficient than others. Okay, I'll show you how in a second. Some are more dangerous than others, and some can only be taken in certain. Some drugs can only be taken with certain routes of administration because they're not effective if you take them other ways. So I have a table that shows you, did you guys see the table where I say type of administration, how long it takes, what kind of drugs we usually take, what are the pros and cons? Do you have that table?
No.
Okay, good. That table is under course documents, and it's also listed in your table as part of Chapter 2. So let's start with the safest way of taking a drug is, what do you guys think?
What did you say?
No, safest.
Orally?
Safest. Oral. Why do you think, orally. Why do you think taking a drug orally is the safest way? Right, and if it takes a long time to digest, what does that mean? If I overdose. Well, it's easy. If I take a drug and if I have a lot of time, right? If I take a lot of pills and try to kill myself with a lot of pills, there's a lot of time to get me help. As opposed to a drug that goes right into your system, right? So you have more time. So it's actually safer because people have more time to kind of get to that. If you're going to overdose, you can pump somebody's stomach. So basically when we talk about oral is the drug goes into the mouth and it's digested into the stomach and then into the liver and it goes into the bloodstream, and that's when it has an effect. So the majority of drugs that are oral take about 5 to 30 minutes to take an effect, and within 6 to 8 hours the complete effect has been it's been completely absorbed into the body. The problem with oral administration is that you lose a lot of the drug because what happens is it goes through the stomach, the intestines, and therefore food can interfere with the absorption of the drug. So I always give this as an example. Have you ever had like a martini on an empty stomach versus having a martini after eating Taco Bell? What's the difference? It doesn't affect you as fast. It's not as strong. So you're not going to get as drunk. So even though this is safer, it's a less efficient method. It's very hard to know what dose, right, is going to actually take effect when you take it orally because there's all this stuff going on in the stomach that can interfere with absorption. So dosing gets a little bit dicey. Does that make sense? You don't really know what the dosage is going to be. So if you really want to get the exact dose, what would be the best thing to do? Inject directly into the bloodstream, with a syringe. Then I know that the body's going to get that dose without interruption. So even though oral is safer, it's not as accurate. The dosing can get interfered with. Some drugs cannot be taken orally. Heroin, cocaine, insulin cannot be taken orally. It's not a good drug. It doesn't absorb well. It's interfered with some of these things that are going on inside the liver and the intestines, all of that stuff. So the negatives, the positives, let's go over the positives, is that oral is safer, so there's a lot more time to get to somebody if they're in trouble, because you can stomach pump. And if a person is poisoned, especially with alcohol, oftentimes they'll throw up. And what happens with alcohol is, you know when you drink a lot and you start to feel like, oh, God, all of a sudden, this never happens to me, but I'm just noting what has happened to others, where you have a drink and you're like, oh, my God, I feel nauseated. And you start to feel like you're going to throw up. That's actually the stomach's protecting you. So it sends off some sort of message that shuts the stomach down, closes the stomach to protect you from drinking more, and that makes your body like something closes, like a valve in the stomach, and that's why you throw it up. So that's one of the great things about alcohol. That doesn't mean that you can't die from alcohol. You still can, but it has that protective quality. So some of that's a positive. So here are some of the negatives. Negative is that oral has to deal with the GI tract and can be deactivated by food. So the more food in the stomach, the greater the dilution of the drug. And the liver can break down a drug and make it ineffective. So insulin, I think, is one of those drugs that has to be taken with an IV syringe or injection, because it can break down, the liver can break it down and yield it ineffective. And it's less efficient, so I have to take more of the drug to get the same effect as if I were injecting it. So we call that less efficient. Does this make sense?
Yes.
Yes, it is.
Okay, good. It's not that hard, right? This isn't that bad. Okay, injection. The next way to take a drug is through injection. Injection is basically injecting a drug. This is an efficient way where I inject a drug via hypodermic syringe, and it goes right into my bloodstream. Okay? And it takes about 10 to 15 seconds to react, and I need less drug because it reaches my bloodstream and my brain directly. And this is very effective. This kind of injection is very effective for heroin, cocaine, insulin. And it's easy to control your dose because you know you're injecting it right into the bloodstream, so you know exactly how much you're going to get. The problem with it is that it's very easy, even though it's easy to control the dose, it's very difficult if somebody overdoses, right, to stop it, because it's really quite quick and it gets to your body very quickly. So another problem is that there's a lot of issues with bad veins collapsing when people continue to inject, and there's a lot of danger of infection with drugs that are used in this mode. But again, it takes effect rapidly, so it's easy to overdose. So when we think about laws about drugs and policies about drugs, we want to think about, well, how is this drug taken? Is it taken in a dangerous way? Those kind of things can kind of help inform your decisions about how you want to view a drug. Does this make sense? And we'll talk about all of it. So the other thing is, in addition to IV, there is also another kind of, you can also do intramuscular. Have you ever heard of intramuscular?
No.
Intramuscular is like putting it in the muscle, so it's not right in the bloodstream, but it's kind of put into, here's the thing, intramuscular right here. It goes into the body, so it goes into the muscle. They do a lot of fertility drugs like this, and then from the muscle, and steroids. From the muscle, it's then injected into the bloodstream. This is not as efficient as right into the bloodstream, but it's absorbed into the bloodstream from there. They also have where they go subcutaneous, which means under the fat, just under the fat where they put it in, not necessarily the muscle, but under the fat, and the tissue under the skin. Again, this type of subcutaneous and intramuscular IV takes about 3 to 5 minutes to be effective. Now the problem again is there's spread of diseases through the needle like hepatitis. There's also issues with HIV, and then we have issues of vein collapse, issues of infection. So these are all problems with IV drugs, and again the overdose issue. Like I said, heroin is a drug that's taken often this way. The most efficient form of drug route of administration is called inhalation. Why do you think inhalation is the most rapid? It's also the most addictive, quickly addicting route of administration. Most people think it's IV, needle injection, but it's actually inhalation. Why do you think inhalation is the most addictive form of Alexandra, what is your question? Do we know each term? It is not on the PowerPoint. There is, all of these terms are on this chart. Do you see this chart? This is a chart that I posted on Blackboard. You can find it under course documents that has all the information that we're talking about. Okay. Lungs have, tons of blood vessels. Okay, and why do you think we have a massive amount of blood vessels here? And the reason why is because what are we dependent on for life? To breathe. So this is where we are extremely efficient, right here. Tons of blood vessels because we are reliant on air. So inhalation is actually the most rapid way to get the drug to the brain, because there's so many veins back there. Get it in the blood, into the system. So we have what we call this term, which I can never say right, called alveoli, right? Alveoli, am I saying that right? And alveoli is basically a huge surface in the lungs with tons of blood vessels. It's a huge surface in the lungs with tons of blood vessels. And because of that, that is the most efficient. So if I ask you what's the most efficient versus an addictive method, route of administration, what are you guys going to tell me?
Inhalation.
Inhalation, that's right. It takes 5 to 8 seconds. It's got the strongest to get in there. Nicotine, marijuana, crack are used this way. Most rapid effects, quickest and strongest. It's difficult to control the dose, and the high is very intense. It doesn't hang out anywhere. It just goes bam, quickly to the brain, and there's an intense high, and it's the most reinforcing method. When we say reinforcing, we mean that's just another way of saying addictive. So that's the most addictive method. The next one that we have is topical. Has anybody ever used a Nicoderm patch? Or like a pain patch? Well, the Nicoderm patch is basically you put the nicotine patch on your skin, and then it slowly absorbs into your skin, to your muscle, into your blood. That's topical. So topical is absorption through the skin. It's not injection into the skin, but it's absorption into the skin. Topical. There's also intranasal, which means that it goes through the, you sniff or snort dust or powder in the nose, like cocaine, and it's similar to inhalation. It passes through the lungs into the general circulation. And there's, it skips the stomach and just goes in through the nasal passage. There's also what we call sublingually. Sublingually is when we place it under the tongue, like acid, LSD, they do that. And it's, you know what, sublingually reminds me of those mints. Have you ever seen those mints they sell that are like pieces of paper and you put them in your mouth? You know what I'm talking about? Do they still make those?
Yeah.
Do they still make those? They do. Do people eat them? I never. Yeah, they kind of gross me out. They taste like a stamp, but Listerine strips. And okay, so the Listerine strips, that's kind of that's like sublingually, and LSD is taken that way. So why do we care about the route of administration? Because the same drug taken with a different route of administration can have very different drug effects. So, and the route of administration also impacts how dangerous people perceive the drug. And if people perceive the drug to be more dangerous, some drugs than others, maybe they will treat it differently. So for example, cocaine and crack are the same drug. Did you guys know that? They're just taken with a different route of administration. So if I'm using crack, I'm going to get, what's going to happen to the crack person versus the person who's using cocaine? Who's going to get addicted faster? Crack, right, because crack is taken orally. So the person using crack, using a different, same drug, different route of administration, is going to get addicted more quickly. They're going to get a stronger high. And the route of administration, again, impacts how dangerous the drug is perceived to be. So because of this issue with crack cocaine, the crack cocaine issue, did you know that there are laws, which I think in California they've kind of reversed them, but there are laws where, did you know that you would get a 5-year prison sentence if you had 5 grams of crack cocaine, and you would get the same sentence if you had 500 grams of cocaine? Does anybody know that? Okay, so if I could sell 500 grams of cocaine and supply a ton of 50 crack dealers, right? Couldn't I? If I had 500 grams, if I sell 5 grams to 50 crack dealers, then I only get the same sentence as one of those crack dealers, 5 years. Does that seem fair? No, it doesn't, does it? And that's like one of these big, I think in California they've kind of reversed this a little bit, or they're trying to, but in other states. So, okay, so here's the issue. So if but why do you think that was? Well, some people argued that because the route of administration between coke and crack were different, that justified 5 grams of crack being equal to 500 grams of cocaine, because the 5 grams of crack would be more quickly addictable, that's not even a word, addictive, than the 500. But does that seem fair?
The ones who mostly abuse it. Like when Whitney Houston said crack is whack, and
go ahead.
She was using powder, so as if she was higher class than a crack user or something.
Exactly. Right. Right, and so that a lot of people had said, oh, well, this might be why they gave the crack. There's this big inequality where you have 5 grams of crack versus 500 grams of cocaine. You're getting the same sentence. So the supplier of 50 people who sold crack would get only the same number of years. And the reason, but this was used as one of the excuses for that, Derek, but most people feel that the reason why the crack cocaine inequity existed was because it was targeting minorities. And minorities were people with less money were the ones who were actually using the crack because it was a lot cheaper. Does that make sense? So that's one argument. So that's an argument against this argument, but some people say that no, it was because it had different effects, it was more addictive. Okay. So what are some things that affect affect how we experience drugs? What's interesting is even
placebo is like
though drugs have certain actions and effects, drugs also can have what we call placebo effects. Do you know what placebo means?
And then the person thinks that they're actually high, but
What is it?
they're not actually high. It's like a mental thing.
Right, it's a subjective experience. You feel like you're getting objectively drunk, but there's no active ingredient in it. What was your question, Alexandra, when you said, is it subjective? What did you mean? What were you referring to? Because I saw it later. Is what subjective?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I just thought, is the I guess is the ideal of what the laws consider, the penalties for having drugs. We were talking about cocaine, but 5 grams versus 500 grams. Is that considered subjective? Because obviously there's
Yes, because it's a law.
Right. Okay, that was my
Right.
question.
Perfect. It is subjective. Good throwing in from the other day. That's perfect. Okay. That's subjective. So also placebo effects are considered subjective because that's any effect of a drug that doesn't depend on the chemical interaction with the body. So it's anything except the chemical activity that creates an effect. So there was actually a study where they gave, I don't know if you guys ever heard of this, where they gave people a fake beer and they told them that it was beer. And what do you think they noticed that started happening? People acted drunk. So that's a subjective or placebo effect where sometimes when you think something's going to happen, you think there's going to be an effect, you start to act like, you start to feel weird and you start to act crazy or drunk, but you're really not. There's no chemical going on. So we call that nonspecific or placebo effect. And a lot of sometimes our subjective, our experience of drugs, even though there's a chemical interaction, can be shaped by these things that we call expectancy. So these people expected that they were drinking and expected to be drunk. So they had this idea. It can also be based on past experience with the drug and whether you've had a positive or negative past experience, and also setting, who you're with. If you're drinking a glass of wine by yourself, that's going to have a different effect than if you're drinking a glass of wine at a big bustling party, don't you think? So some things about drugs there are some placebo effects based on these factors. So in a study, let me tell you about the expectancy for LSD. LSD is a drug that can be very altered by what a person's expectations are. For example, if you use LSD, you know what LSD is? Do you guys know what it is? Okay, LSD is a hallucinogenic drug. It's in the hallucinogenic family. It is a very disorienting drug because it causes hallucinations, it causes you to see things, it causes you to hear things, you see colors vividly, you might see a pattern like those glow sticks that people have? They like those when they're on LSD because they might see like a trail of light. It's a discombobulating drug. Not something you want to get in a car and start driving, or it's pretty disorienting. And what's interesting about LSD is LSD, basically what it does chemically to your brain is it makes you think that your brain is simultaneously in a sleep and wake cycle. Isn't that interesting? Because when you're dreaming, you kind of have all this weird stuff going on. So with LSD, your brain is simultaneously in a sleep and wake cycle. So it's like you're walking around dreaming, basically, with your eyes wide open. So a lot of times, a drug like LSD, people can have expectancy. They can expect, or they'll hear that LSD is going to cause them to have a bad trip. Have you ever heard that? Yes, it's biologically in a sleep and wake cycle. So it's sleep and wake are happening at the same time. So LSD is a drug that's affected by expectancy. And I guess I kind of think about it this way, like if you go to bed and you're stressed out and worried, what kind of dreams are you going to have? Yeah, you kind of have nightmares. So it's kind of like that. If your expectancy is, like, I knew this guy in high school years and years and years ago, and one day I think he was peer pressured by a bunch of people to use LSD, and his parents were very religious, very against it, blah, 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 blah. And in his mind, he felt very guilty. But he did it anyway because his friends wanted him to. What do you think happened to him when he did the LSD? He felt guilty and had a very bad trip. He started freaking out. He panicked. He thought he was going crazy. He felt that he needed to go to a mental institution, and eventually he landed in the ER. And then his parents found out that he did LSD. He went crazy. I mean, he's fine now, but his expectancy, we could talk about the permanent effects of LSD as well. Stacy, if you want me to bring that up later, because I have something on the web actually about that. The permanent effects of LSD. Because sometimes people take LSD and they tend to have, you can have this thing that lasts for several years where you kind of have like flashbacks, where you feel like you're kind of on the drug again and it just like pops up. That's something different that we can talk about. But in terms of expectancy, he had this idea that drug was going to affect him negatively, and it actually did. So drugs do have placebo effects, and the way that we think about placebo effects the most when we think about drugs for depression and testing drugs for depression, because they found, studies have shown that if you have a group of people who receive a antidepressant and a group of people who receive a placebo where they're trying to test whether or not the antidepressant makes the person feel better, that both groups, actually the ones who get the sugar pill and the ones who get the antidepressant, their depression actually lifts. So just the mere idea of thinking that you're getting a pill that's going to help with your depression influences your mood and will make you happier. A lot of people argue that there's not enough difference between the people who get the placebo and the people who actually get the antidepressant. They feel like, antidepressants operate with this placebo effect because there is a significant difference between people who get the antidepressant and people who get the other drug, the non-drug, but some people say, why not just go to a psychologist and have the expectation you're going to feel better and do that, and your depression will probably lift just from the mere attention that you're getting from another person. But this idea is called that's a placebo effect. So when the control group receives the placebo, what happens?
They start feeling better.
They start feeling better too. But not as good as the other ones, but some people argue it's not that much different. So, but let's talk about the subjective effects of marijuana. So this study by Green, Kavanaugh, and Young looked at a bunch of studies. So they did what we call a meta-analysis. Do you guys know what a meta-analysis is?
No.
Have you ever heard of that? Okay, well, a meta-analysis is actually something good to know because we always hear these tidbits about research, right? Oh, this study says this and this study says that, and it comes out in the news. Meta-analyses are studies, kind of, Yesenia, that look at, and like, let's say there is a study on marijuana and memory. There's probably like 30 or 40 studies on marijuana and memory, or actually there's probably hundreds of them. A meta-analysis looks at all 100 and looks for patterns. Because some studies might say memory is not good, memory, there could be contradictory results. So it's good to look at what the majority of articles are saying. Does this make sense? So a meta-analysis looks at multiple analysis, cumulative analysis, and says like, on average, what do these studies show? Does this make sense? And that's what you really want to look at when you're answering a research question, is looking at meta-analysis. What are the majority of studies? Because all studies have flaws, and all studies use different populations, and they have different whatever, so you want to review everything. So in this study, these guys wanted to review and see if people consistently report the same drug effects from marijuana, so the same drug effects. And researchers reviewed studies that asked people information about their cannabis use and what they experienced. And what was interesting about this study is they found contradictory effects that were experienced. Some people said, I sleep better when I use marijuana. Other people said, I can't sleep. Some people said, I feel sedated, I feel more relaxed. Other people said, no, I feel really hyper. Some people said my memory improved, my memory was worse. We know, what do we know really happens? Are people a good judge of what's happening to them? That it's a worse memory. So that's their perception. People reported high sex drive, some people reported low, some people reported more sociable, some people reported less sociable. So the individuals also reported that the context, the environment, context is just a word for environment, the context had an effect. So like if they were with 4 people, they reported they were more up, more euphoric, more laughter. If they were alone, they said they were more relaxed and tired when they smoked marijuana. So what this study shows us is that the drug effects can be based on placebo. So even though there are these objective effects, people's perceptions of them can be altered based on their environment, their expectancy, the setting, and their prior experience with the drug. So that makes sense? Okay. So people's now let's talk about something that's also really important. Let's get back to danger, and let's get back to objective effects. When we talk about drugs, we want to, the reason I'm breaking a little later, do you guys mind? Because we started kind of later. Do you think that's okay? Well, I was thinking we could go and see, maybe we could get this done, because this chapter is actually not, I'm trying to see, this is actually a very short chapter, so we may be able to get it done on the quicker side, because next time we're going to do theories and chapter 3. So this chapter is actually very brief. So do you want to just go straight through? Wouldn't you rather go straight through and end early?
Yes.
Okay. I agree, because look, how many more slides are there? There aren't. So why don't we just go straight through this time? Because the chapters are going to get longer. Okay, so let me talk to you about, and we don't have an assignment in this chapter either. Well, Derek, put your food in at 8 and come back. Can you do that? How long is it going to take you? I think we might, well, we'll see. See, that's what I like about this class. It's kind of funny. Okay. Oh, you were just making a joke. Okay, so let's talk about effective dose. So when we think about drugs, we want to think about how dangerous they are. So one thing is some drugs are super dangerous and some drugs are not so dangerous. What drug is really safe that I talked about? Marijuana. Remember, you could smoke a field of marijuana, you will not die. Marijuana is not a poison. Some drugs, but marijuana can give you what in your lungs? We always forget about that. It can give you lung cancer. So it can have dangerous long-term effects, but short-term effects are not so bad. So when we think about danger, we look at the effective dose and the lethal dose and how close together these two things are. So effective doses, let's say Maria has a headache. So she wants to take an aspirin. The effective dose, or we call the effective dose, is basically the active dose. It's how much aspirin does Maria need to produce a given effect, meaning eradicate, get rid of her headache. Okay? So effective dose just means that in 50% of the population, it's going to get rid of your headache. Does this make sense? So at what dose is that drug going to have the intended effect? At what dose of heroin am I going to get the high that I need?
The movie
right? And that's going to change as you become more tolerant to a drug. But if the average person takes a drug, then the active dose is the amount of that drug that's going to create the intended effect. Got it?
Pure heroin.
Easy, right?
Mm-hmm.
It was 100%. No, it was more.
Uh-huh.
Right. Right.
And so the effective dose was less? Okay, so you needed less of the drug to get high. Correct? Okay, when we're talking about effective dose, it's, okay, how much of the drug you need to produce a given effect. So, the other thing is, but okay, thinking about the drug in general, Derek, like if we think about a drug like heroin in general, the effective dose and the lethal dose is the amount of the drug that will kill you. Okay? So that'll kill about 50% of the population, right? So that drug you're talking about in that film, you're going to need less of that drug to overdose, right? Were people dying on it? That heroin? Yeah. Okay. So when we look at drugs and we think about danger, we want to look at the relationship between the effective dose, what we need to get high or what we need to get rid of a headache, and the relationship between that and the lethal dose or drug toxicity, how much of the drug is toxic to us and will kill us. If the effective dose is close to the lethal dose, right, there's the amount that I need to get high is really close to the amount that'll kill me, we say that drug has a low safety margin, meaning it is dangerous. Some drugs have effective doses that are very close to the lethal dose. Meaning what? If the effective dose is, they're unsafe and can kill you. The drug that's very unsafe is a barbiturate. You know what a barbiturate is? It's a sedative. It's for, it was introduced for sleep disorders, for people with anxiety. It is a drug it's the drug that killed Marilyn Monroe. It's the drug that killed Anna Nicole Smith. We're going to talk more about barbiturates later, but just to give you an idea, the effective dose is so close to the lethal dose that they don't like to prescribe these drugs anymore because people will, it is a sedative depressant because people will, what? Easily overdose. So I don't think, so that's one reason why people don't want heroin on the market or out there. Xanax does not have I don't think Xanax has a similar, you can overdose on those drugs, but they're much safer. Xanax, the effective dose and the lethal dose of Xanax is a lot wider. Were you saying that Xanax is like a barbiturate? Because it's not. It's a different family. Is that what you're saying, Alexandra?
It was like a sedative, like, you know, to kind of calm you down or whatever.
Yeah, but it's a different type. It is. As Xanax is a sedative, and the reason why Xanax and the Valium drugs, those are called benzodiazepines, and they were invented because those other drugs were so dangerous. So they don't have the narrow window that we see the barbiturates have. But they do operate the same, and they have replaced those drugs, but they're in a different family under the same grouping, but they're much, much more dangerous. Barbiturates are actually the closest that barbiturates are to anything is alcohol. They're pretty much the cousin of alcohol.
Okay.
Prozac is an antidepressant, which is a totally different thing.
Got it.
Go ahead.
No, I just said those are the safer versions.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right, but they're not that safe because if you take a drug like Xanax for an 6 to 8 week period, you can start hallucinating. If I take Xanax every day for 6 to 8 weeks, you can start to hallucinate if you stop taking the drug abruptly. They're extremely addictive, but they're not as dangerous. But just because they're not dangerous doesn't mean that you can't become addicted to them. You know what I mean? Okay. So I always tell people, we're going to do a piece on that too. So toxicity is the degree of danger for the organism who ingests the drug. So this is called the ratio of the effective dose and the lethal dose. Toxicity is also known as therapeutic index or safety margin. That's the degree of danger for an organism who ingests the drug. So it's the ratio of the ED and the LD. So if the effective dose is 1 and the lethal dose is 1, what does that tell me? I could easily kick the bucket. I'm going to kick the bucket if I take that drug, like cyanide, right? So, okay. So, heroin is considered, I would write this down, an extremely unsafe drug. Heroin is an extremely unsafe drug because the LD and the ED, the lethal dose and the what was that other thing? Lethal and effective dose are similar. And there's also heroin has great variability when it comes to the drug's purity and potency, which is what you were talking about, Derek. So what drug has a high safety margin? Marijuana, right? Marijuana has a high safety margin. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about potency and what is potency and what is, what do I mean by that? Okay, potency is how much of the drug do I need to get an effect, which is different because potency is basically meaning that you need a smaller amount to get an effect. Like that heroin was more potent, you needed a smaller amount. The effective dose is smaller. That means that it's more potent. If you need a smaller effective dose. Does that make sense? So potent drug. Another thing, okay, right, a smaller. So LSD is a drug that actually, LSD is not going to kill you. It's not really dangerous for you. It's not dangerous, actually. A lot of people think it's dangerous because they have images of people jumping off buildings and being destructive that way. It's actually really not a dangerous drug. It's, hold on, I'll come to that in a second. It's that you need, okay, I'll answer your question, Yesenia, in a second. When I talk about marijuana, I'll compare it to mushrooms. So, okay, like LSD isn't going to kill you, but you don't need a lot of it. So it's a very potent drug. You just need a teeny weeny amount and you're going to get super high. Whereas a mushroom, a hallucinogenic mushroom, you need to eat a lot more to get the same effect. Does that make sense? Another thing that we look at with drugs is cross-tolerance. Cross-tolerance, you know what tolerance means, right? Tolerance means that the more I take the drug, the more I'm going to need. So this actually should be, do I have a definition for tolerance here? No, I don't. Oh, here, sorry, I went over it. Tolerance is basically the diminished effect of the drug over time because of repeated doses. So what happens is, if I'm using alcohol, alcohol is a depressant, right? So the body is always trying to reach what we call homeostasis. Do you know what homeostasis is? It's like balance. It's trying to go back to balance. So if I pour alcohol in my system, my body, alcohol is a depressant, so it's going to bring me down. What's going to happen is my body's going to try to readjust by naturally bringing me up more. Does this make sense? So my body's going to become, it's, well, I don't know what a negative feedback loop is. What is that? If you tell me.
Failure or whatever it is, whether it's producing more calcium or whatever it is.
Well, okay, I would think about it like the body's trying to protect itself by going back to its natural state. So if I pour a downer on it, my body's going to give me more up. So alcoholics keep pouring downer on them, and then their bodies naturally adjust and get more hyper. And so when the alcohol stops, all of a sudden, what do you have? You've got that hyper body. Do you see what I'm talking about? So your body, and the people become extremely like edgy because they're on too much because they were adjusting for the alcohol. So that's how tolerance kind of happens. Tolerance is the body makes adjustments for drugs. Every time you take a drug, the body's trying to fight back and adjust and reach that state. So if I drink, my body's going to pump up the hyper mode because I'm pouring depressant on it, bringing it down. So then once I need more and more alcohol to combat the up that I've been producing, right? That's tolerance. So tolerance is over time, and I'm repeatedly using the drug, I'm going to need more and more of it. So the experienced heroin, Rhonda has a question. Okay, Rhonda, hold on. I'm going to get you. I love people who ask questions with the hands. I'm going to enable your audio, and I'm going to enable your video. Okay. Go ahead, Rhonda. Rhonda. Yeah, I'm going to keep talking until Rhonda... Where'd Rhonda go? Did Rhonda disappear? I think Rhonda evaporated. She'll come back. Okay. So everybody understand how tolerance works? Okay, so let me just tell you this. So alcohol is a depressant. If I keep drinking, the body's going to make an adjustment for the depressant. It's going to kick in more stimulant to counter that. And as a result, I'm going to become less sensitive to alcohol, right? Because I have more stimulant in my system. So that's why I have to increase the dose. And when it abruptly stops, the brain is overstimulated and it becomes exaggerated and intense. So I'm going to become really wakeful, have trouble sleeping, I'm going to be nervous, I'm going to start hallucinating and all of that. And then in severe cases, you can have seizures. So cross-tolerance is the fact that some drugs are kind of cousins, meaning they're actually, remember we were talking about that lock and key that I was telling you about?
Mm-hmm.
You know when I was talking about the lock and key, some drugs are a key that unlocks a certain thing in the brain, like your memory, your coordination. Some drugs are cross-tolerant, meaning that they have that same lock and key. I can hear myself echo. So is it Alexandra? Is it me that's echoing? Let me turn off somebody. Okay. It went away. No, it didn't. Gladys, do you have a question? I think only I can hear the echo. Okay. Yeah. Now I don't hear it, Alexandra. No, I do hear it. Okay, whatever. It's not that bad. Okay, so cross-tolerant is like two drugs that have the same key shape, right? So they unlock the same things in the body. So, for example, alcohol and barbiturates, remember I was telling you that, are actually cross-tolerant, meaning that if I'm an alcoholic, I'm going to want to have barbiturates because barbiturates do exactly the same thing. So that means that it's cross-tolerant. I'm going to turn some of these mics off because I feel like I can hear myself and it's annoying me. Okay. Now I don't hear anything. Okay. So, alcohol and barbiturates are are cross-tolerant. If I'm addicted to alcohol, I'm going to be addicted to barbiturates. Just like certain drugs in the opiate family. Do you have a question? No? Okay. Just like certain drugs in the opiate family. So like opium and heroin are in the same family. If you're a heroin addict, well, you guys know what Oxycontin is?
No.
Do you guys know what Oxycontin is? Okay, Oxycontin is a drug that the doctor will give you for pain. It's super addictive, but what's interesting is it's exactly the same family. It's the same chemical structure. It operates in the brain in the same way as heroin. So they're both in the same family. It's in the opiate family. And because it's in the opiate family, if I'm addicted to Oxycontin, which the doctor gives me, it's okay, and I'm going to need a lot more heroin than somebody who's not a heroin addict. They're cross-tolerant, meaning that if I'm addicted to one of them, I'm also addicted to other drugs that are in the same family because they contain the same lock, the same key. Does this make sense? So a lot of drugs are in kind of families. Like Ritalin is in the same family as cocaine. They're both stimulant drugs. If you're addicted to cocaine, you would love to have some Ritalin. Did you guys know that? Let's see what Derek. I'm going to turn you back on, Derek. I just had to turn you off while everybody was in there. Okay, go ahead. Yes, heroin, so these drugs are cross-tolerant. So you can be addicted to a drug in one category, and therefore you will be addicted to the drug in the other category. There are other factors that you have to think about with drugs. Some drugs have, if you take one or more drugs together, they have what we call antagonistic effects. Yesenia has a question. Okay, I'm going to bring you on. I'm enabling your audio first so you can speak. Okay, Alexandra, you can talk. You're enabled, I think. Yeah, oh, no, you're not. Are you? Go ahead, Alexandra. I can't hear you now. You have to turn your, I enable you and then you have to hit the, can you hear?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
You talked about Ritalin. Isn't Ritalin given?
Speak again.
You talked about Ritalin. Isn't Ritalin given to
Yes.
children with like hyperactive disorders or ADD?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And
I am not a fan of that
no,
because it is a stimulant medication and it creates. So it's similar. It has similar operation as cocaine. So it is cross-tolerant.
Do they still give that to children?
Okay. Oh yeah, they do. I am not a fan of that. Yeah, I'm really, we can talk more about it because I have some research on it too that we can talk about, hopefully if we have time. But ADHD medications are stimulants and they do, wear down the brain. And I just don't believe in giving those medications to children with developing brains. I don't see that they have a good effect. There's two arguments. One argument is, well, the kid would take drugs, it prevents drugs. Like some people say, oh, if you give the kid ADHD medication, they're going to be more calm, they're going to be more capable, and they're going to get more out of life, so they're going to listen more, and they're not going to feel alienated, so it's going to prevent them from doing drugs. I think that it's just going to wear their brains down and actually make them want to do drugs because it's creating an addiction. So I don't. Go ahead, Derek. I have your thing on.
And basically, she told me the psychiatrist told her if
your mic is out. You just have to turn your mic on. I've activated it. Now you just have to turn it on up here.
It doesn't sound right for a psychiatrist who is educated to tell parents something like that, just to basically. She's in a. No, it's my sister. She's not. She's 9 years old. Yeah, and the thing is, and I spent some time with her over the weekend, and we were playing baseball and stuff like that, and it seemed like when we were playing, she was calm, and it seems like she was more
How old
active,
is
and some of the
your
symptoms
cousin?
that ADHD, some of
It's
the
your
symptoms of
cousin?
ADHD were being displayed while she was
Oh,
in
your
the
sister. How
house
old is
and
she?
not able to go outside. So to me,
Really?
and also I was explaining to my mom that she needs to be assertive when she's dealing with the psychiatrist and not just let them tell her anything and you know.
Exactly. That's what they say.
It sounds like they are. And my mom, she was kind of like looking all over the place because she knew I was right in what I was saying, but it doesn't. I don't know. She doesn't seem like she's gonna follow up. I mean, only time will tell.
I agree 100%. Is she still gonna? Do you think she's gonna continue taking that medication? Because is the school pressuring her to take it? Yeah, I don't think it's a good idea to give. Psychiatrists. That's their whole training
No,
is
I didn't
about
actually
giving
ask
people
that question,
medicine,
but that's
and
a
a
good
lot of
question to ask.
psychiatrists aren't pharmacologists, and a lot of psychiatrists um, um, pressure people, and the schools pressure people because it's easier for the teachers to deal with it. And then have they pressured you and said like, oh, we're not going to keep her in school because of that? Ritalin and Adderall are very similar drugs. One's just a little different than the other. Adderall is supposed to be a little smoother, but they're all the same. They're all
Right.
stimulants. I would not, honestly, give that to a child with a developing brain. I would really be kind of pushy with your mom. Like, I don't know what her situation is, but I really feel that they pressure people to use these drugs, and they pressure people who, trust the doctors or whatever. And I don't think the doctors are bad people, but it's a mentality. You know what I mean? There's a lot of pressure from pharmaceutical companies to use these drugs. The United States consumes like 900% of all the Ritalin in the world. Why is that? It's because there's a lot of pressure from pharmaceutical companies to tell us that we need to take it. And so I just don't think it's a great idea, and I would try something else with her. Or try to go to, I don't know, talk to some other people. Um, I think there's a woman, I had a student actually, whose mother was part of this group where she would go to the different schools and she would show them videos about how you have to caution yourself before putting your kids on any types of drugs, whether it's antidepressants or um, like Ritalin and stuff like that.
Yeah, I agree.
Um,
Yeah, I
I think
agree.
it's in my office. That that I'm trying to think.
She it
Yeah, I
it
think it's
feels
in my
like
office, the video, and
the
I'm not
way
going to
she
go
was
there.
speaking, it feels like
But
she was like
I would try
felt
to
like I
talk
was
to
attacking
her
her, so I didn't want to really like continue to talk about it because it seemed like
and
she
get
was
another
getting kind of
opinion.
what was the word I'm
You
looking
know
for?
what I mean?
Defensive, yeah. So
And I know it's
I just
frustrating
kind
because
of
like
backed off a
sometimes
little
you
bit.
you try to tell your parents
I
stuff
still
and they
care
don't
about my
listen,
sister's well-being, and
right?
that's the main thing that I'm concerned with.
Defensive. So Tanya, what did you do? Your brother has the same situation. Is he taking it? Do you think that he has to take it? Yeah, I'm really a big, like, I don't like to really put my opinions out there because I feel like, but, you know, let me just say, this isn't really an opinion, it's a drug, you know what I mean? It's a stimulant. It's going to affect the brain, especially the developing brain. I would really try to maybe show her some information about how it affects the brain, or you could tell her that it's a stimulant. You know, here's another issue with those drugs. Any drug that you take impacts your ability to sleep. Did you guys know that? So your body isn't getting appropriate sleep, whether it's taking a stimulant like Ritalin or if it's taking alcohol. It feels good because you can fall asleep really quickly, but you're not getting the REM sleep, which is the sleep that you need for emotional health. So what happens is when you use these drugs, you get poor quality sleep, which then in turn breaks you down and breaks down your emotional state, and you're not as happy, you're not as healthy. So the sheer fact that these drugs affect your sleep is another problem, too. But okay, we could talk more about it, and you, children at my school take it, and I don't like the mental state it leaves them in if they're taking it. Yeah, the kids are like in a daze. Yeah, I remember we were talking about that. Okay, so let's just go back for a second. So antagonistic, so we were talking about stimulant like cocaine and Ritalin being similar because they were cross-tolerant. Then we were talking about drug effects. So antagonistic effects is the effect of one drug cancels out the effects of another. So for example, if I take a drug for blood pressure, right, I have high blood pressure, so I take a blood pressure drug to lower my blood pressure. I write this example down. Then I take cocaine with a drug that lowers my blood pressure is going to go up. They're going to cancel each other out. Again, with Ritalin, Ritalin increases blood pressure as well. So if I take Ritalin with a drug that lowers blood pressure, they have antagonistic effects. They cancel each other out. A lot of people like to use cocaine and alcohol together because cocaine is a stimulant, alcohol is a depressant, so the cocaine will get rid of some of that sloppiness that they feel. Another type of effect is what we call additive effects. So some drugs have additive effects, meaning that if you take that drug, it's going to increase 1 unit. Meaning like if I drink 1 glass of wine, I'm going to be twice as drunk if I have 2 glasses of wine, 3 times as drunk if I have 3 glasses of wine, 4 times as drunk if I have 4 glasses of wine. So it's an additive effect. But sometimes when you take one drug with another drug, it has what we call a multiplier effect. So you know when you go to the pharmacy and it says, do not take this with alcohol? It's important to not take drugs with alcohol because what happens is they have multiplier effects. The way the 2 drugs interact with each other creates a way more intense effect. So it's actually not just going to make you a little bit, it's not just going to make you a little bit drunker, it's going to make you like really drunk and really screwed up. So that's synergistic. Does that make sense? It's a multiplier effect.
Yes.
You got it? Okay. So I wanted you to look at this drug classification chart that I created. Do you see it here? Because I wanted to simply just, the drug, it's not on there. Gladys is like, what is she talking about? I don't have the chart up here. It's actually here under course documents. Do you guys see it? Does everybody have it? Okay, this is people said to me like, Dr. Shakib, what drugs are you talking about? I don't know all these drugs. Okay, so the drug classification chart, I tried to make it simple. Now there are so many different drugs and so many different classifications and blah, 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 but I just try to break it down simply. Not everything is in here, but these are kind of like the basics. Like I don't have that drug, what is it called? What's the one people take for sleeping? Ativan? No, is it Ativan? Ambien. I don't have that drug. But like, Ambien is a drug that if you take Ambien with alcohol, people actually, I don't know if you've heard this, if you drink alcohol and take Ambien, people will find
No.
themselves sleep driving. Did you know that? Yes, they'll do things, they're totally asleep, and they start doing things as if they were awake. And they can actually do something very dangerous. So that's like a really bad, that's actually an example of a synergistic effect. It's not just a multiplier, it's multiplying the effects of these drugs. And I actually had a friend who told me that he found himself out driving God knows where. He took an Ambien and had a drink and woke up, got in the car and drove 30 miles and was pulled over by police and was woken up by a policeman knocking on his window. Very dangerous. I don't have Ambien in here because it gets very complicated, but I just want to give you a quick idea. So if you look here, I put the drug class. So here I have the stimulants. So we're going to talk about stimulant drugs. You can find the chart under course documents on Blackboard. And it's also, I think I listed it in the table. So stimulants are things that excite the central nervous system. They make you hyper. Ambien is not a barbiturate. It's in a class of its own. It's not a barb. It's a newer drug too. So they become really complicated. So it's a CNS stimulant. It excites everything. So if you take a stimulant, it's going to speed everything up. Okay? Stimulants speed up your central nervous system. They make you digest, like everything speeds up. Going to the bathroom, all of that stuff. Your digestion. So it creates a arousal, elevated mood, high, more confidence. People become like a sense of well-being, but they also can become extremely paranoid if they take a lot, and their mental functioning can deplete if you continue to take these drugs. Cocaine, Ritalin, and amphetamines. Those are all in this stimulant. He could show his mom this chart which puts these drugs in the same spot. Okay, Ritalin, stimulants, all of these create high compulsive use, which means people continuously want to go back and use. They are associated with people committing crime. Stimulants make people aggressive while they're on them. They make people very angry. So if you give people cocaine, Ritalin over time, they can become paranoid, they can become aggressive. It's not a calming drug. Depressants are the opposite, and those inhibit or slow down your central nervous system. So a depressant is like a sedative. So those are basically things that cause relaxation, make you feel less anxiety, less drowsy. So I have alcohol, barbiturates, Valium, which are benzodiazepines. So they slow your function, and they can shut your breathing down. Sedatives can shut your breathing off. Narcotics are drugs that are called painkillers. Okay, those are also depressants. Those are opium, which is the most natural form, heroin, morphine, codeine, oxycontin, oxycodone. Those are painkillers. We call those narcotics. They're associated with crime because people really want to take them and they can't get them. Then we have hallucinogenics, which are the drugs like LSD that I was talking about, mescaline, mushrooms, that affect your central nervous system, but they don't really know how, but they create like a sleep and wake cycle. They're not associated with violent crime, and they're actually not powerfully reinforcing. They're not addictive. Those hallucinogenic drugs are not super addictive. THC, marijuana, is considered in a class of its own, with hashish, which is the dried resin of the cannabis, which is more potent. And people do not marijuana is not known to cause people to break the law. and it's not powerfully reinforcing. Ecstasy is in a class of its own. It does something to serotonin. It's called an empathogen, which means that it makes people feel closer to others and peaceful. It's got some stimulant properties in it, but it's not a stimulant. It's in a class of its own. It's usually classified as like a club drug. It tends not to be used compulsively, but it depletes serotonin in the brain, and it can cause a lot of problems with neurotransmitters, emotion, mood, those kinds of things. So does everybody have this chart, and is everybody going to look at this chart so that they understand what goes in the groupings? It's okay, Alexandra. Okay. All right, so let me ask you a quick question. I just want to see who's here. So I'm going to do a poll and just ask you if you were here today because we are done. Oh, wait, unless Yasina. Okay, hold on. Yasina, do you want to go? Let me give her a...
Yeah.
I
just wanted to ask.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, my mic is...
Go ahead.
So if you use more than one drug from the same group, that's what's gonna cause a multiplier effect?
No, multiplier effect means that if you combine certain drugs, and they have,
Okay.
it's specific drugs, but if you combine like certain drugs, it's going to have a multiplier effect where it's going to make you even more, it's going to make you really loopy to the point where it's extremely dangerous. You don't even know what's going on.
So it doesn't have to, they don't have to be in the same
No, they
class.
don't. So, yeah, so what was the one that I gave you as a multiplier effect? Did I give you an example?
Alcohol and I think like antidepressant? I think that's what you...
What did I say? It wasn't alcohol. Okay. What did I... Oh, Ambien. Not an Ambien is not an antidepressant. Right.
Oh, yeah, it's asleep.
Right. So you take it, and it's going to have this extremely powerful effect. The two drugs in combination have such a powerful effect that it multiplies the effect. It just becomes much stronger.
Okay.
So that's why whenever you see something, where they say don't take with alcohol, don't take it with alcohol.
Okay. And the additive effects, that's just using one drug, like more than the recommended dose?
No, additive effect means that if you just increase the dose, you're going to get equally screwed up. You can kind of easily predict how drunk you're going to be because you know if you have one drink and then you have two drinks, it kind of adds on. It's not like multiplying, right? It's just like, do you see what I mean? One drink, it means I'm this screwed up. Two drinks means I'm twice as screwed up. Three drinks means I'm 4 times as screwed up. But it's like additive. It's not like, oh my God, I take 4 drinks and now I'm really, really super. It kind of just adds together. Do you know what I mean?
Okay. But it's not combining more than one drug. It's just one drug.
But you take it and you get this much more. Right. It's additive. Like 1 + 1 = 2. Whereas synergistic and antagonistic just means that 2 different drugs cancel each other out. So those are different drugs. And then the other one was synergistic, which was a multiplier, right? Okay. You're welcome. Okay, so do you guys want to just come in and tell me if you were here? Just click yes.
Yes, I was saying it's a multiplier when you drink.
Drinking and taking ecstasy is a multiplier effect? Or what, Derek? I don't have you on. I turned your thing off because I'll enable your audio. What were you saying, Derek? Wait, you have to turn your mic on. A lot of us forget because I can only turn it. I can only activate it, and then you have to turn it on.
Yeah, it multiplies it.
And it multiplies, like it makes it a lot more strong. It's not like, oh, I'm drunk plus I'm on X. Is that what you're saying? Does it, okay, so would you say it multiplies it? Or is it like, okay, so like a synergistic effect? Okay. So you guys, we only had, wait, when are we going to have class again? It's so weird, right? So, okay, so Monday we're going to do the chapter on theories. And the chapter on theories is very interesting. So, make sure that you bring that worksheet, okay?
No.
You know which worksheet I'm talking about? There's an assignment that we're going to go over that has like all the different theories in it, and then we also have what we call a theory chart. So there's a chart that has all the theories in it, and then there's an assignment that we're going to do at the end of class to make sure everybody understands what the theories are.
Yes.
Okay? Are you with me? Yes. Okay, so why don't we all go have dinner, and we'll see each other on Monday. We'll do theories.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? You guys good?